Howdy gamers, let's talk about the runes for Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger's in a strange spot where he can be played top, mid, and AD. For the most part, support's kind of a joke, but in the keystones that you run, it's pretty dynamic in the matchups that you'd be playing. So in top lane, I feel like you would get more value out of Conqueror, as with Conqueror you gain an advantage over enemies that have to dive onto you. Because if they have to dive onto you, you basically are always playing this control game where you're positioned on your towers, and if they want to dive onto you, they have to dive into these towers as well, or turrets. And once they do that, you're basically going to have Conqueror fully stacked, and then you can be healing from them and kiting at the same time. Gives you either in your lane matchup or against team comps that have to dive onto you, Conqueror does gain a lot of value. And then that's why you wouldn't see it mid lane so much, as the the main champions you'd be playing against mid lane are either going to be AP mages or assassins, and in that case, you're either going to get more value out of Airy or Electrocute. I kind of think Arcane Comet's a joke. Arcane Comet might be good into mages, and maybe I'm missing something, but with Summon Airy is going to give you the opportunity to beat down champions that you're stronger than levels 1 to 4. So basically every assassin champion in the game, and then through doing so, you're going to gain lane position against them. And if you have that lane position, everything's easier. And if you're solo killing them as well, everything's easier, because assassin champions just naturally have the level 6 advantage on Heimerdinger. And even if he's positioned on his turrets, they have tons of ways to dodge his turret damage, either through untargetability or invulnerability through Zettel, Talonal, Kiana Q, etc. So it's basically just not a good play to rely, or just to play as if they can't do that, and to abuse Heimerdinger's advantage early through summon or through Airy is going to give you a better result. With Electrocute, I don't see it too often, and I feel like if you're trying to capitalize on landing an E, then Electrocute's your best bet, as your natural combo is you land the E, you place the turret, and then you shoot the W and auto attack. Even if you miss the W, it's an Electrocute proc, and by doing so, it's just more burst onto the target, and if you take a bigger trade, then it's also putting you in a better lane state. With Arcane Comet, it accomplishes the same thing, but you could get more Arcane Comet procs off afterwards versus Electrocute being on cooldown. But I think that's entirely fine, especially with how laning phases are going to play out. So with Electrocute, you put yourself in the domination tree, and then since you're laning against with Electrocute, I think you'd be using it mid lane or bot lane, and then playing into control champions. So in the mid lane, it would be champions like Syndra, Orianna, your worst case scenarios, and then in the bot lane, it would be long range champions like Aphelios, Xayah, I suppose. So the second rune would be Taste of Blood. You heal for a small amount, and then this is only on a 20-second cooldown every time you damage the enemy champion. So this is going to be offsetting a lot of their poke early, and it's pretty easy to proc this, as even if they outrange you, you can hit them with like one instance of your W in most cases, as they scatter everywhere, and you only have to damage them with one of them to proc Taste of Blood. For the third rune, you're basically choosing how you earn the ability power from it. Zombie Ward would be through clearing wards, Ghost Poro is through placing them, and then Eyeball Collection is through getting kills or assist. So Ghost Poro is going to be your more consistent option in the mid lane, as a lot of what you're doing is just wave clearing and then putting wards in the river. With Eyeball Collection, it's more inconsistent, but it can be faster to stack up, like if you're already winning. So you can like discern which one to run depending on, like, I guess the matchup, or if you just, I don't know, if you're smurfing, man, fuck it, run Eyeball Collection. For the third rune, you have okay options in either Relentless Hunter or Ravenous Hunter. Ravenous Hunter is generally going to give you more value, as healing off your abilities has pretty good synergy with how Heimerdinger plays anyways. But with Relentless Hunter, you have extra out of combat movement speed, and this is going to help you to reset to lane faster, and then also position while you're in the lane. But since your turrets put you in combat, you can have a lot of anti-synergy with that. But it would also give you extra movement speed to position up the lane to land your initial E onto the enemy champion, if you were just trying to kill him in that sense. But other control mages make better use out of a Relentless Hunter in that terms. For the secondary runes, you have okay. Your most obvious options would be into the inspiration tree, with presence of mind, or not with presence of mind, with perfect timing, cosmic insight, and then free boots, minion dematerializer. All of these help you in different matchups, and with electrocute, since you'd be playing into a mage matchup, it'd mostly be about matching their wave clear and then also having the ability to pressure them. So in the inspiration tree, you could go futures market and then you could go free boots or cosmic insight. I think cosmic insight would be your best bet, as you'd probably be running teleport and it'd be about getting advantage over these champions. With futures market's main purpose in these matchups would be to get you Lost Chapter at around 1100 gold, as if on your first or second teleport to the mid lane, if you have the Lost Chapter over the enemy laner and then you lock them into the laning phase, champions like Syndra or Orianna, then you just have complete advantage over them. And you can either use that to poke them under tower, to farm the enemy jungle, or to take objectives like as they're under tower, or just to make them miss minion waves entirely. So that's like the whole purpose of Futures Market. You shouldn't be using Futures Market to like buy like components of items or like control wards when you don't have gold or something, because you do go into debt and the lending cost is significant. But with something like Lost Chapter, you outweigh the lending cost in the first place. Come late game, you can start just going into debt to like complete items and whatnot. When you're on like 3 or 4 items, going into debt is completely fine, as you're probably just going to pay it off and complete like things like elixirs anyways. So, and then with the adaptive runes, it's going to be ability power, and then magic resist, because playing into a mage matchup mid lane be primarily when you were running this. And then with cosmic insight, you get 5% cooldown reduction on your abilities, items, and summoner spells. This is pretty solid, as Heimerdinger's abilities are on fairly long cooldowns, and even when you get to 2 items, you could still be sitting on like 20% cooldown reduction, which doesn't feel great. Getting to 25 is okay, and then sitting on the 5 before you complete 1 cooldown reduction item is just better than not, as it lets you get more W's off in a neutral situation, and in an all-in, if you get 1 more rotation of the abilities off from the CDR, then it does just make the difference. But having the extra summoner spell, or having the extra summoner spell cooldown reduction is where you get more impact out of this. It's pretty generally useful, and if you wanted to switch it for something like free boots, it'd be completely fine, as you would just be looking to spike on like Ludens plus Swordpin boots, which would be completely fine in the mage matchups. So that would be that rune page. With Conqueror, you would be wanting to run this into, again, champions that have to dive onto you, but don't immediately kill you. So effectively just every bruiser matchup, which you would mostly see in the top lane. So champions like every melee champion basically, but the ones that dive onto you the most often, or like have to, would be champions like Camille, Irelia, where once they're on top of you, you have your E to peel for yourself, and then your W to initially deal damage, but then once they're on top of you, it's just about your turret damage and then kiting them, and then trying to dodge their abilities as well. So with Conqueror, your basic attacks or spells that deal damage to enemy champions grant you 2 stacks of Conqueror for 6 seconds. They give you bonus adaptive force, which is going to be ability power, and then around level 9, it's going to give you around 30 ability power, so it's not so bad. And then per stack, it stacks up to 10 times, and then for ranged champions, they only gain 1 stack per basic attack. That's not so bad, as you're able to stack it up so easily with the abilities and then the turret plating. Or not the turret plating, Christ, with the turrets. When fully stacked, you heal for 15% of the damage you deal to champions. So, through this extra healing, it makes it a lot easier whenever these champions are on top of you to just simply wiggle around and still be useful, because once they're on top of you, you're basically spending your HP for your turret's damage. And so long that you're surviving it, then that's effectively all you can do, because once those champions dive on top of you and you spend E and W, you have nothing else to offer but your HP. And through having more ability power, it makes the turrets deal more damage, and that's that. With the secondary rune, it's going to be Triumph. You could also go Presence of Mind, but with Presence of Mind, you do have to get kills or assist. With Triumph, takedowns restore 12% of your missing health and grant you an additional 20 gold. It's kind of the same concept. You want to spend your HP versus spending your mana against these champions. You could even itemize the health AP items early too. Items like Haunting Guys, Rylai's, etc. Because in these matchups, it would probably just be about, like I said, surviving them, but then having the ability power to deal with them once they're on top of you too. And an item like Leandry's would just work so well, or Rylai's once completed. For the third rune here, you don't really have great options, so your best is probably Tenacity. With Tenacity, it reduces the effects of like CC, so it's not the greatest, but you don't get anything really from attack speed or lifesteal. And then for the fourth rune, it's going to be Last Stand. You deal more damage the lower health you are, so again, whenever the champions dive onto you, you deal more damage. So spending your health, your turrets are going to deal more damage, and so long that you're not just immediately dying, then you actually have something to work with. For the secondary runes, I'm not entirely sure, as something like this and this is okay, but I think it would be harder to use against the Bruiser champions. With Taste of Blood, it's more of a trading tool in lane, because it gives you a small amount of health. So if an Irelia was to dive onto you, healing for like 20 or 30 is like okay, but it's not really going to make or break things. With Ravenous Hunter, you heal off the damage dealt by abilities, but it's kind of the same thing. I feel like you would get more value out of something like Bone Plating plus, I suppose, Overgrowth. It sounds so weird, but with Bone Plating, after you take damage from an enemy champion, your next 3 spells or attacks you receive deal 30 to 60 based on your level less damage, and then this is on a 45-second cooldown. So effectively, every time the enemy melee champion would dive onto you, you would just have effectively more health, because they have to get through Bone Plating initially. And since you're a ranged champion, they don't really have ways to proc it prior. The only champion I could think that could maybe do it would be Camille with her W, but if you get hit by that, I mean, you really deserve it. With Overgrowth, you get more HP basically just for existing in a lane, because whenever minions die near you, it gives you more maximum health. Whenever 120 monsters or minions have died near you, then you gain an additional 3.5% maximum health. This would give you about 80% or 80 health early, and then later into the game, especially if you're building again the HP items, it would give you about a ruby crystal's worth of health come mid to late game. With conditioning, it would be completely fine too. You get armor and magic resist, and then increased armor and magic resist by 5%. But with bone plating, you'd be negating a lot of the enemy's advantage up until 10 minutes. And so long that you do that, then maybe it's a trade-off, probably just depending on the enemy champions all in timing. So champions like Irelia, where they're strong level 9, maybe you get more value out of conditioning. Champions like Camille, where maybe they kill you level, like they can jump onto you levels 4 to 5, then maybe bone plate would be better. Maybe I'm completely off on this too, but that's my thoughts on that. So I've talked about Conqueror and conditioning, or Conqueror Electrocute with Summon Airy. Again, I think you should be running this into Assassin matchups mid lane. Into Bruiser matchups top lane, the damage that would add up with Airy plus Scorch just wouldn't matter. And then once you've reset into lane in their full health, you have to do that all over again. In the mid lane, it's more impactful as you're playing into Assassin champions. And against Assassin champions, they have like a natural advantage into Heimerdinger, as again, they have lots of ways to dodge his turret damage. With Summon Airy, you deal more damage to the enemy laner in all instances of your damage, through your auto attacks or through your abilities. With Arcane Comet, you have to land an ability on them, and every Assassin champion wants to be behind the minion wave anyways, so landing your W on them consistently isn't really reliable. And landing the E on them would guarantee the Arcane Comet damage, but if you get 3 auto attack Summon Airy procs, it's the same thing. Summon Airy's cooldown is also based on how close the enemy is to you. So in an all-in, if they're diving on top of you, then you're able to get it off multiple times. And even if you're in Zanya's, then Airy can be proccing off your turret damage. And Yeah, so levels 1 to 4, it's mostly just about your auto attack and then your W against the enemy to build up the damage with Summon Airy. For the secondary rune, you have options of Mana Flow or Nimbus Cloak. I think Nimbus Cloak would be completely fine, as into the Assassin matchups you could run Barrier or even Ignite, but more commonly with Barrier, you would have the offensive and defensive utility of it, where Nimbus Cloak's going to give you more movement speed whenever you cast it. It would also work on your flash, but you'd primarily want to be using it with the Barrier. So whenever a champion like Zed, Talon, Kiana, etc. would ult onto you, then you have Nimbus Cloak to not only block the initial damage once they jump on you, but then get the extra movement speed to dodge the incoming skill shot and then position onto your turrets. I don't know why I always call it towers. For the third rune, I'm not really sure about Absolute Focus over Transcendence. I suppose Transcendence, as it would give you some scaling from the runes, since you already have the early power through Summon Airy plus Scorch. With Transcendence, you get 10% cooldown reduction once you reach level 10. And that in combination with Ludens or Zanya's would put you in an okay spot. With Scorch, your next damaging ability against the enemy just simply deals more magic damage to them. And with this, with Scorch plus Airy, so long that you're winning levels 1 to 4 against the Assassin matchups, then you have lane control. And if you have lane control, then they can't really capitalize as hard on their levels like 5 to 9. So long that you're playing the matchup well. And if you die before then you're just simply playing the matchup wrong. And I don't really see like the value of the other rune pages against those champions. For the secondary runes with this, I would run Perfect Timing with Cosmic Insight. I suppose you could run Biscuits as well. It'd be okay to give you the extra mana in the laning phase. That's basically it. But with Cosmic Insight, it would give you, again, cooldown reduction on the abilities and summoner spells. In this case, you would have just 5% off barrier isn't that crazy, but then having the 5% off your flash is potentially pretty useful against assassin champions. With Perfect Timing, you start the game with a stopwatch, and then at 10 minutes you can use it. So once the enemy mid laner is about level 7 to like 8, then you have the stopwatch and can negate like one all-in from them without them having like really any say-so in it. So very, very effective rune. And then for the adaptive runes, it's going to be ability power, and armor. The only AP assassin I could think of would be like Diana. You would obviously run magic resistant to that, but this would be that's what I would run into the assassin matchups as. You beat them down early, and then you have lane control, and then you can get your scaling through itemization versus through the runes in that case. And then with Arcane Comet, I just really don't see it. If you're running it in the bot lane, I suppose they could give you more damage in an instance in which the enemy dives onto you, but you would be losing out on the trading tool and then also the minor runes in the domination tree, which are pretty useful for Heimerdinger, especially if you were playing him bot lane. So I really just don't see Arcane Comet. So that's my thoughts on Heimerdinger runes. I'm not like super sure on them, but I think if you're looking for some insight on the different keystones, I hope this helped. I definitely learned a bit through like researching it. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I answer literally all of them. If you're a Heimerdinger player and you have some insight, like let me know. Leave that in the comments too. If this video helped you, leaving a like on the video helps me. And if you're interested in watching me play League of Legends or just talk about it some more, check out my Twitch. It's twitch.tv/SawyerNelson. I play some mage supports, not Heimerdinger. Don't ask me to play him. Bye bye.